So I am an assistant district attorney in Wyandotte County. Prior to that, I practiced criminal defense for 4 years. I was the deputy public defender at the Northeast Kansas Conflicts Office. Basically, I was a public defender working with the State Board of Indigenous Defense. So most of my career has been dealing with criminal offenses, criminal law.
That's why I thank you for taking the time as a legal expert to
Thank you.
kind of give advice and tips on, how to interact. Sometimes law enforcement may not de-escalate, but sometimes we could do things that could help the situations or help us get out of the situation or live through the situation, which is key. Yes. So for my first question is, so let's say I'm walking down the street, and law enforcement follows me and they stop me and ask me, what's your name? Do you live around here? What are your thoughts on that?
Great. So I'm going to talk about two different scenarios.
Okay.
So the first scenario is, and this is what is important for anyone to understand, is voluntary versus detention, because those are two different things.
Okay.
So if you're walking down and a police comes over and they try to stop you and it's a voluntary interaction, you're free to go. You can say, I don't have time, your officer, and walk by, even if that officer asks you for your name. No, sir, I have somewhere to be, let me go, right? That is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with you saying, I don't want to engage in a voluntary interaction with you, right? You don't have to necessarily give their name. You're free to just say no, thank you, and just walk out. Now, if the officer wants to detain you because they think that they have reasonable suspicion that you may have or are about to commit a crime, then they could escalate that with, hey, well, no, actually, I need to ask you a question about blah, 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 right? There, I just heard over my radio, someone was, kicked in a house to rob it and you matched the description. You would have to give your name, because now it's no longer a voluntary interaction. It's now an interaction where the police officers believe that you have done something wrong. So you would need to give your name to them. Okay. I saw in your questions, you asked, well, what if you don't, right? Then you're prolonging that interaction. Then that police officer could potentially arrest you to figure out who you were, and that kind of prolongs the detention. So the type of the stop in any type of circumstance that you have with a police officer, whether it's outside, whether it's in your car, whether it's in your home, it's always going to be dependent upon what you're being viewed as, right? Are you a suspect? Are you a witness? Or are you just having a voluntary encounter? Even witnesses, that would be another individual in which the police officer could stop you and say, hey, you're a witness, I want to speak to you. You still have the ability to say, here's my name, but I would like to not engage with you. You do have to give your name, but you do not have to help them make a case against you.
Right.
I mean, that's just not, I've never understood why people want to help them put themselves in jail. You don't have to do that.
They have to make the case.
You know what I mean? Like, they're paid to investigate and to do all that. I don't necessarily have to help you with that. So we're going to flip that situation. We're walking and the police officer doesn't think you did something, but maybe they think you're armed and you're about to do something, right? You're pacing, you do something where you have a gun, and you might be dangerous. Then yes, the police officer can stop you and ask you for your name. Like, what are you doing? What type? And they can actually do like a stop and frisk. So there are different circumstances in which you're interacting with police officers that you have to figure out where you.
And how do you teach about being detained?
Sure.
Talk about that.
Sure. So if a police officer wants to detain you, as I said, they need reasonable suspicion, and they should tell you what that reasonable suspicion is, right? So I just heard over the radio that there was a burglary in this particular area and the individual was wearing blah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. They can detain you for as long as they need to either confirm or dispel, right? So either confirm that you're in fact the person or not. Now, if they confirm, you know what's going to happen. You're about to get arrested.
Right.
And so, I mean,
right.
Like that's,
Yes.
I mean, and
Right.
that's the thing. Sometimes people will think like you can be detained in handcuffs. You can be detained by sitting on the ground. Any type of detention can occur with they just block your ability to walk away, to leave that encounter that they have with them. Let's talk about traffic stops. They pull you over for a traffic infraction because that's the reason why they would need to pull you over, right? In order to do a detention, because that's what that is, it's a brief encounter, they're detaining you, they need to be able to pull you over for something. Now, to search your car, that's a little higher amount of knowledge that officer needs, right? If they're searching your car based upon a traffic infraction, that's not right. Right? There's no reason for them to search your car based upon a traffic infraction. If they see an open alcoholic beverage in your car, then they could search your car. If they smell the odor of marijuana, which I hope now there's going to be more case law challenging that and not allowing that to be a lawful search. But right now it is a lawful search. That is something that they could search your car for. So if an officer comes to me and they want to ask me to search my car and I say no, they need to tell me why they want to, right? Well, actually, I'm going to search your car because I smell the odor of marijuana. Or actually, I'm going to search your car because in plain view, I see something that I know immediately is related to some type of criminal activity, right? They need to give some type of rationale. So my tips that I give to parents when they're walking is to, one, you shouldn't have a fear of police officers. I think that's the most important thing that I want to say throughout my entire conversation. Is do not have fear, because the reason why is then you do flight, right? Because you're scared, or you might do something as tell a lie, be dishonest, which would then just create all this extra stuff that's not necessary. So even if you've done something wrong, you have rights, right? And you should shield yourself in that right, feel protected by it, and not be afraid to run or to be dishonest. So that's my biggest thing is I want parents to explain to their children, like, these are interactions. Yes, it's scary, but we're going to practice certain things so that it becomes rote and you don't have to fear the interaction that you have with police officers, right? Not every person is an individual that wants to shoot or harm you. And every person has a perspective. So don't fear, but be cautious. And these are the things that you need to think about and do.
I was going to go down this path, but I'm going to ask.
Sure, go ahead.
Because it's easy to say, do not fear. But when you look at the media and you look at, and it's not like the media is pushing something that's not there. When you're seeing videotapes of people unarmed getting gunned down, how do you tell someone don't fear?
Yeah, I think that's so difficult to really say, don't fear with just saying the words without having to look at the situation and the practice and say, okay, well, what could we have done differently? So that's my biggest thing is I want parents to explain to their children, like, these are interactions. Yes, it's scary, but we're going to practice certain things so that it becomes rote and you don't have to fear the interaction that you have with police officers, right? Not every person is an individual that wants to shoot or harm you. And every person has a perspective. So don't fear, but be cautious. And these are the things that you need to think about and do.
That's good. So don't fear.
Don't fear.
Be cautious.
Be cautious.
And how important is that practice or repetition in that?
I am an aunt of 7. Whenever my nephews and niece started driving and started walking with friends by themselves, we went over this all the time, all the time. And they would come and they would say, well, Aunt Tonda, this happened to me. Okay, well, let's play that. Or this happened to my friend. I think the earlier, the better of instilling not fear, but respect is necessary as much times as you can. Because practice with your young ones, explain to them what's going on, talk to them, and and hope for the best. So I think that's the biggest thing. And every situation that I have looked at over the years where people are like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about that? What would you have done differently? I say, well, this is what I would have done differently in this particular case. And this is what I would have done differently in this particular case. So I think that's the biggest thing is don't have fear, and to practice and to have these conversations like all the time, anytime there is any interaction with the police officers, positive, negative, talk about it with your family members and say, okay, well, what did you do that worked? What didn't you do? Not every person is going to de-escalate. Not every person is going to escalate. There's a range of things individuals can do. But I think when all sides are prepared, it helps with things not going astray.
I agree with that.
So I sometimes the officer who was in the military and they paper sprayed him, right? That's a perfect example of something that I recently talked about with my nephews and my niece, right? And I said, okay, so why did that person do that? Well, they decided to keep on driving, even though they had lights in the back because they wanted to go to somewhere safe, which is commendable. What I would say to them do is call dispatch. Hi, dispatch. My name is blah, 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 blah. I have 2 officers behind me. I'm going to now pull over. I'm not eluding. I'm not fleeing. I just want to go to this location. So the dispatch is already communicating with these officers in the back so that when they approach your car, they're not thinking, oh my gosh, you're fleeing. Oh my gosh, you're trying to. I think having real conversations and looking at the incidences and being objective and also putting that perspective that this is always going to be what should happen helps to, I guess, bring down the fear. And again, practice. When it's your time to be pulled over, then rote will automatically set in, the comfort level will automatically set in. Police are supposed to respect us, right? Our constitutional rights, and they shouldn't be doing certain things. But does that matter if you're dead? Like we were talking about.
Exactly.
I mean, does it matter if the police were wrong and you're dead? No, it doesn't matter at that point. Like, stay alive.
You need to get through it, right?
Exactly.
You also made a good point about respect. Even if the officer does not respect the people that they're supposed to protect,
right?
Teaching the young people, be respectful, because meeting disrespect with disrespect is going to be a volatile situation. So
I agree. And then also my mindset is, I don't have to do what you do. I mean, that's just always how it's like Michelle Obama said it the best: when they go low, we go high. It's actually power under control.
I like that. Power under control. That's a whole interview in itself.
Right, it really is.
I like that one. I like that.
Right. So that's what I talked about with them. Like, hey, and then when the officers ask you to get out the car, get out the car. Even though, it's not wrong what he did, you can challenge that later, but try to de-escalate the situation. And again, this circles back around. Even if you're searching my car inappropriately and wrong, I'm not going to argue and fight with you or run off with it. I'm going to step out of that car, allow you to violate my constitutional rights, and then hit you up later. You can file complaints with CPOs. And people are like, oh, what's the difference? Well, it matters if this individual is constantly having situations where they're violating individuals' constitutional rights, or they're even doing, for instance, bias stopping, right? You can't do that in Kansas, So that's what I would do is, I'm going to tell you, no, you can't search my car, and you better give me a legal reason why you want to believe you can. And even if it's an invalid reason, I still would get out respectfully, allow you to search it, and then take care of the complaint later on. I'm not going to even argue with you. I'm not going to tell you, oh, I'm going to it's not, who cares? Right. There's no reason for me to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do that later. So that's how I think individuals should deal with this.
That's good advice.
Yeah, why I'm not, well, when I got something for you, officers. Like, no, just let him do his thing, and then, deal with it on the ladder.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, just knowing that even if you save one life, one person can walk away and say, oh, maybe I shouldn't, get smart with the officer because I know my rights, but then I live through it and I can take care of it on the back end.
Take care of it on the back end, right? Sometimes people ask me, well, if I haven't done anything wrong, shouldn't I just volunteer the information so that I could go? Yeah. And that's going to be a personal choice. I mean, to be honest with you, right? You're like, hey, listen, this couldn't be me because I just left Walmart 5 minutes ago. I have a receipt in my pocket. Let me show you, right? And then, you're free to go. I, on the other hand, don't believe in doing that. And that's just my personal choice because I have come with a lot of circumstances in which, even though I'm giving you this information, you've already had confirmation bias in your head, and you're still, if you're going to arrest me, you're going to arrest me, right? So that's just my personal take on it, just from dealing with criminal defendants and different things where, everything you say, and this is something with Miranda, we'll get to that, but to think about everything you say can and will be used against you. So even the truth, right? You're telling the honest truth that can be used against you. It could be turned and used as a way of convicting you. Like I just need people to take that into consideration, that my truth something that's truthful could be used to put me in jail. So I'm of the opinion of saying less. That's just my personal opinion. It's just how I operate, but I give people both sides to do what they feel is best for them in that particular circumstance. So my personal opinion is it really depends on the individual. It really depends on what you want to do. You do have to give your name, but you do not have to help them make a case against you.
Right.
I mean, that's just not, I've never understood why people want to help them put themselves in jail. You don't have to do that.
They have to make the case.
You know what I mean? Like, they're paid to investigate and to do all that. I don't necessarily have to help you with that. So that's a personal opinion, and I mean a personal choice. But I will tell you, yes, your detention could be longer. Yes, they could say, okay, fine, I'm going to arrest you. So this leads us into your other topic. You're arrested, you're in jail. The state of Kansas would have 48 hours, or the state of wherever you're at, Missouri, whatever. They would have 48 hours to file formal charges against you. So they get the officer's notes and they might say, this isn't enough, let them go, right? That's possible. So it's just all depends on your comfort level and whether or not you believe the information you're going to give them is helpful and they're going to get you down the highway. Now, if you know that you've done something, you probably
don't want to
be quiet, right? Because you have rights. You have a constitutional right. You shouldn't be doing things, but if you are, that's just,
you don't have to give that information.
You don't have to give that information, right?
So I guess it almost ties back into the more you're comfortable with, if you're not fearing law enforcement, then you can make a judgment call. If this officer looks like, they're good, they're on the up and up, they're just trying to confirm that you're not the person that just kicked in the door. Hey, it wasn't me. I just did this. Okay. And then they should let you go.
Exactly.
If you see that they're trying to make a case, because I like the way you said it, confirmation bias, they've already pinned you as a person to do it, then that can be when you need to quit talking.
Exactly. And exactly what you hit the nail on the head. It all comes back to your comfort level and how you are interacting with that police officer and how that police officer is interacting with you. Right. But you will never get to that comfort level if you've already had fear already up in your mind that, oh my gosh, they're going to try to put me in jail, or they're going to try to kill me, blah, 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 like all those things running in your mind. Then you will automatically see, what is the best situation for me. So yeah, it's completely that circle of what I'm saying is, yeah, it's definitely a comfort level. So like you said, like if I tell you this and you look at it and you're like, hey, blah, blah, and I can leave, that's helpful. And you're not detained for longer than unnecessary.
What is your advice on recording incidents when you're put over by law enforcement?
Absolutely. So to me, recording isn't necessarily a fail-safe. I mean,
it'll just help you challenge it when you live through the situation. Maybe having
exactly
that evidence.
Yeah, and it could help you. Also, it could help keep everyone safe. So for me, recordings aren't necessarily something that I put a whole bunch of faith in, versus being present in the moment and understanding what you're doing. So if you're so fixated on making sure, like, I have my camera, it's here, and then you just forget everything else and you reach for something and, oh my gosh, he has a gun, or you want to flee, or so, I think, although I think recordings are helpful, I think being present in the moment and kind of understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's going on is actually better. File a complaint with your department. And another place that people need to file, you can file complaints with CPOs. And people are like, oh, what's the difference? Well, it matters if this individual is constantly having situations where they're violating individuals' constitutional rights, or they're even doing, for instance, bias stopping, right? You can't do that in Kansas. If there's an implicit bias, which is the reason why you're stopping me to get in my car and search, that is wrong. So I think sometimes as a community, we just say, okay, it happens, whatever, and let's just move on. It's like, no, you've got to build a paper trail, because that's the only way that they'll either get those course corrections, the counseling that they need, or they'll be reassigned to a different job. I think the biggest thing is to never be afraid to advocate for yourself respectfully. I mean, that's my biggest thing. If someone comes over and asks you to search your car, no, like, you can't search my car. Well, I haven't done anything wrong. It doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, but I don't want you to search my car. Even if I haven't done anything, there's nothing wrong with telling an individual no, that these are my rights. I have them. I want to exercise them. And I think that's the biggest thing, is the fact that sometimes you become intimidated or scared with advocating, but there's nothing wrong with advocating for yourself.